Keeping Up by Judy Turner of South Durras 2536. Narrated by Janine Penfold. A can of Rosella tomato soup. That's all Joan wanted. She wandered around for a considerable time before asking one of the staff at Woolworths where the soup aisle had gone. "Aisle 5!" the girl shouted. Joan winced. She knew most young people believed all elderly people were deaf. Now mandatory masks and the 1.5 metre social distancing rule meant the young ones yelled even louder. Joan sighed and turned her trolley around. Last week, the soup was in aisle 3, next to dried fruits and flour. Today, the dried fruits had disappeared and the flour shelves were empty. Was everyone at home in a frenzy of cake baking? She eventually discovered the dried fruits in aisle 2 and placed the packet of prunes in the trolley, but the soup stock had vanished. They had rearranged the entire store, except for the meat and fresh produce. Why did they do that? Joan hated it. Heavens above, the COVID lockdown meant her bridge sessions and U3A classes were cancelled, and she couldn't visit the club for a meal or even a sit-down at the coffee shop. The Indian chap at the coffee shop gave her such a warm greeting when she called in last week. Joan missed seeing his big, white-toothed smile now hidden behind the mask. At present, he served only takeaways from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Joan thought the empty tables and upturned chairs at his coffee shop were probably the most heartbreaking sights she had encountered for a while. She resolved to buy a takeaway coffee every trip to town, even though it meant sitting in her car down by the river with only the seagulls for company. Yes, her routine had been thrown right out of whack, making her feel a bit discombobulated, and today, this rearranging of the supermarket made matters worse. She had coped with so much change in her 90 years. Mind you, every appliance in the house considered itself smarter than she, and she sometimes struggled to keep her wits about her to manage them all. She possessed a smartphone plus a smart computer, and her son gave her a smart watch which recorded her steps and phoned someone if she fell over. Once, she accidentally dropped the watch from the balcony, and it took her a while to get down the steps and scramble through the garden to find it. She could hear her phone ringing non-stop in the house, but, of course, she still had to get out of the bushes, back up the stairs, and inside to answer it. That was so embarrassing. All those frantic people phoning to ask if she was all right. Fortunately, someone stopped the ambulance before it arrived. Her new car continuously beeped at her about something or other, and the navigation map and reversing camera kept popping up on the dash, even though she had driven both backwards and forwards for 70 years without having an accident or getting lost. When her previous television stopped working a year ago, the mechanic shook his head and pronounced it obsolete. "But it's only 8 years old," Joan said. "Obsolete," he said. "Not worth fixing." What does that make me then? Joan wondered. She'd heard the same tone of voice in her doctor lately. He seemed to start every sentence with, "Well, Joan, at your age." So many changes, especially over the last year or so. First, the horrendous bushfires destroyed homes, lives, flora and fauna, followed by floods. And then this confounded coronavirus thing. Joan had survived wars, marriage, births and deaths. But this virus loomed strange and frightening. People out of work, lockdown, social distancing. The elderly, isolated in nursing homes, unable to see their families. People sick and dying all over the world. Harrowing television scenes of body bags being loaded onto refrigerated trucks in New York City. The overflowing morgues. And all those pine coffins buried in trenches in mass graves. What a sobering, tragic sight. The entire world lay helpless and under siege by a terrible pandemic, and more dying here in Australia despite the lockdown. She wondered how long it could go on. Joan was glad she lived on the south coast and not in the city. Her son lived in Sydney and now worked from home because of the danger. "Don't you go out, Mum. I'll organise for your groceries to be delivered." But Joan enjoyed her outing to Woolworths and decided she would continue to go while she could still drive. She'd hoped to see a few friendly faces during her shopping trip, but all her older friends had decided to hunker down at home. Joan noticed the few people in the supermarket bore harassed, besieged expressions as they perused near-empty shelves. She pushed her trolley into aisle 5, confronting the array of canned soups, dry packet soups, soups in lidded cups, and now gourmet soups in pouches. 100% organic, they shouted. 100% Australian. Well, all that was well and good, but she still liked plain old tinned Rosella tomato soup. But where was it? Some cans of Campbell's and Heinz sat on the shelves, but no Rosella. She picked up one of the fancy pouched soups and read, "Organic tomatoes grown without pesticides, no sugar, GMO-free." What did that mean? Oh well, she would just have to make do with that, she supposed. Try some of this modern stuff. Keep up with the times. The end.